Behind the doors. My name is John. I'm a 52-year-old construction worker from Boston. 5 months ago, I was selected for a job abroad to demolish slums on the outskirts of a main capital city in South America to make way for new buildings. Although the salary was attractive, I quickly learned that this was not a project I should have taken on. The slums were crowded with houses, with narrow alleys between them, and the infrastructure was abysmal. My coworkers and I stayed in a local hotel near the construction site. From our balconies, we had a clear view of the slums where we worked. One night, it was around 3 a.m. and I was unable to sleep due to my insomnia, and I heard a loud, heavy engine outside the hotel, followed by a sound of people arguing in a foreign language. I looked out the tiny window of the cheap hotel we were staying in and saw an old, rusted van parked in one of the narrow alleys that led to the slums. The van's back doors were open. The incident didn't seem too unusual to me at first, but it happened every night at the same time for the next few weeks. One night, as I was returning to the hotel from work, I saw the same old van parked in the same alleyways as the previous nights. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to explore the alleys alone. The alleyways were so narrow that I felt like I wasn't getting enough air. They were covered by plastic dark tarp, so even during the morning, these alleys were dark as hell. I had to use my phone's flashlight to see anything at all. As I moved through the alley, I found shoes, shirts, and even empty syringes that were probably used for injecting drugs by the local junkies. But one thing caught my attention. As I progressed deeper, I heard the sound of a voice getting louder, as if someone was banging on a metal door. It wasn't long before I could locate the source of the noise. A metal door with the sound of people banging on it from the other side. They continued to bang and bang. I was scared as hell and didn't know what the right thing to do was, but I knew something didn't seem right. I knocked a few times on the door, and as soon as I did, the people on the other side started screaming and crying. They all sounded young, and it seemed as though they were in trouble. I tried to open the door, but it was locked with a key, so I kicked it as hard as I could. As soon as I did, I heard voices yelling, and it seemed like they were coming from the surrounding houses. I heard dogs barking, and the voices grew louder. I knew something was coming, but I had no idea what it was. The door finally unlocked, and what I saw was chilling. There would have been about 15 people, mostly young, taped to the floor, with only 2 of them able to free themselves and bang on the door. I realized then that everyone had been held there against their will. They had been kidnapped. The noise outside grew louder as the kidnappers' dogs drew near. I grabbed the 2 and hid behind a pile of metallic garbage inside the warehouse as I tried frantically to loosen them from the tape that was tied so tight it almost looked like it was cutting off blood to their hands. I could see through a small opening in the pile, and the sight that met my eyes was horrifying. 4 huge men with 2 dogs stormed in with crowbars, demanding to know where the missing 2 victims were. They tore off the tape from the mouths of the others and they began screaming at them. I was sweating and could barely breathe. I thought, if we could wait them out, they may leave to search the streets for us, and that would be our time to run. But they unleashed the 2 dogs instead, which began to sniff around, drawing closer to our hiding place. The 2 people that were with me were terrified and started to cry, and I had to cover their mouths to keep them quiet. The dogs were barking loudly as they approached, and suddenly, one of the men began to dig furiously into the pile of garbage, swinging his crowbar angrily. As I huddled in the dark, my heart racing with fear, I clutched onto a sharp piece of metal that I had found on the ground. My plan was simple. If the kidnapper uncovered our location, I would use it to defend us. But fate had other plans. Suddenly, the other kidnappers began yelling at the one who was digging. Their terror intensified. I strained to listen and soon heard the distant wail of sirens. Someone must have called the police in response to all the commotion. The kidnappers quickly locked the door once again and fled the scene, leaving us trapped in the darkness. But I refused to give up hope. Screaming as loudly as I could, I pounded on the door with my fists and feet, desperate to attract the attention of the police outside. But my efforts got us nowhere, as the sound of the police siren sped past us. And just like that, hope of escaping started to fade. Hours passed, and the silence was deafening. I felt a sense of despair wash over me as I realized that we might never escape. As I continued to help the people trapped inside, as I felt around in the dark, a voice spoke on the other side of the door. As we held hands tightly, we backed away from the door, anticipating what might happen next. Suddenly, we heard footsteps and the sound of muffled voices on the other side of the door. My heart raced as I realized that someone was trying to break in. Were they the kidnappers coming back to finish what they started, or was it someone coming to rescue us? We held our breath, waiting for the door to open. With a loud crash, the door flew open and we saw silhouettes of men in the doorway, flashing lights behind them. It was the police. I will never forget the feeling of overwhelming relief that washed over me in that moment. We were finally saved. I wanted to leave the country instantly. However, I was contracted to this job and wasn't able to leave just yet, even though they were aware of the experience I had endured. As the days passed, I learned the horrifying truth. The kidnappers were part of a vast organization that specialized in human trafficking. If we had not been rescued that night, I couldn't imagine what would have happened to us. Despite the police's efforts to track them down, they seemed to vanish without a trace. I couldn't shake off the feeling that they were still out there. The following week, while walking home from work, I spotted a man following me. I quickened my pace, but so did he. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned a corner, hoping to lose him, but he was still there. As I looked over my shoulder, I caught a glimpse of his face. It was one of the kidnappers. I was sure of it. Should I run? Should I scream? I thought to myself. But something stopped me. The look in the kidnapper's eyes was not one of malice, but of desperation. I couldn't help but wonder what could have driven someone to do such terrible things. As I turned another corner, I noticed the man was no longer following me, leaving me with more questions than answers. Was I being paranoid, or was I really being followed? Who else was in this organization? How many more victims were out there?